Welcome to C-SPAN's Presidential Recordings podcast, this season focusing on the presidency of Lyndon Johnson. We start on November 27th, 1963, 5 days after John F. Kennedy's death. Now President Johnson went before Congress to console a grieving nation.
Mr. Speaker, President, members of the House, members of the Senate, my fellow Americans, all I have, I would have given gladly not to be standing here today. The greatest leader of our time has been struck down by the foulest deed of our time.
He also made it clear that he would pursue JFK's agenda, and that included a particular bill that faced strong opposition from Southern Democrats.
No words are strong enough to express our determination to continue the forward thrust of America that he began. The dream of conquering the vastness of space, the dream of partnership across the Atlantic and across the Pacific as well, the dream of the Peace Corps in less developed nations, the dream of education for all of our children, the dream of jobs for all who seek them and need them, the dream of care for our elderly, the dream of an all-out attack on mental illness, and above all, the dream of equal rights for all Americans, whatever their race or color.
Coming up, President Johnson's calls about pushing what would become the Civil Rights Act through Congress, its ultimate passage, and the racial violence afterwards. More after this. One of President Johnson's closest advisors in getting the Civil Rights Act passed was President Kennedy's brother and U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy. We begin on February 10th, 1964. The two men talk about the House of Representatives' vote on the Civil Rights Bill, which was scheduled for that day, and the strategy for getting it passed in the Senate. Chief Congressional Aide Larry O'Brien and Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield are also mentioned.
Bobby.
Hi, Mr. President.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was very nice, wasn't it?
I thought it was wonderful. 290 to 130, you can't do better than that.
I would think that put a lot of pressure on them in the Senate, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's it. Now, you get with Larry and Mike Mansfield in the morning and work out procedure. I really think that they ought to put that on the calendar and then take it up the first day they can, and then go on and debate it a while before we take up our tax conference report. We might put a little pressure on them that way. Might have a few businessmen, a few withholding people help us a little bit for 4 or 5 days. I think it would be dramatic anyway.
Yeah.
You talk to Larry.
We'll be able to talk to you tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And you talk to Larry and Mike Mansfield in the morning. I told Mike he was in here, and I talked to Larry O'Brien too, and they both have ideas. You get with them, and then you all agree on it. Whatever you want, I'll be for.
Well, we'd want to find out.
Okay.
I'll get back in touch with you after.
That'll be good.
Thanks.
President Johnson and Attorney General Robert Kennedy on February 10th, 1964, the day the House passed the Civil Rights Act by a vote of 290 to 130. Looking ahead to the bill's Senate prospects, the President and Attorney General Kennedy spoke again on April 23rd to talk about an agreement between Senate Minority Leader Everett Dirksen and Majority Whip Hubert Humphrey on a key part of the bill.
Bobby?
Hi, Mr. President.
I'm sorry to be so late calling you. I hope you didn't wake you up.
No, that was fine.
We had 6,000 out here tonight, and I just got through shaking hands with some of them.
Oh, I saw it on television. It sounded very good.
We had a wonderful meeting.
Yeah, I said it was the biggest one they had. That was terrific.
Thank you.
I talked to Bill Moyers, gave him the message. I don't know if it got through to you.
No.
It was just on the jury trial amendment.
Yeah?
And they reached a compromise, which I thought would be acceptable to you. Of doing this for 30 days. Senator Dirksen wanted 10. Of course, the 57 bill is 45. So we reached a compromise of 30.
All right, you think it's all right?
Yeah.
All right, well,
And I think everybody wants to have a jury trial. And it's acceptable to us. We had said earlier, and I had appeared before the Senate, it's 45, so it brings it down to 30 now.
if it's okay by you, it's fine by me.
Now, the other thing is, he was optimistic about, which I also passed on to Bill Moore, but he was optimistic about getting a bill within the next 6 weeks. Senator Dirksen, and talked about another one of his amendments. Looked like we made a good deal of progress. That on Title II, the impression he gave was that he really wants to work it out and wants to get the thing behind everybody. So I think that
I just think if we don't pass it, I'm getting awfully frightened. If we don't pass it to next 30, 40 days, I'm afraid these people are going to hurt it pretty bad.
Yeah.
Aren't you?
Yes, I am. On the other hand, the pressure gets greater on Dirksen not to hold out. It's going on now, the filibuster.
I tried to put a little of it on tonight.
Yes, did you?
With everybody I talked to out here.
Yeah. I think that's good.
I think they can feel some of it maybe in a few days about how important it is to go ahead. I'll be back in there tomorrow night. I've got 4 poverty places tomorrow, and I'll call you Saturday.
Congratulations on the rail stuff.
Well, it worked out all right. We didn't have to talk to them about your problem, but I'll get that thing set up in the White House. Maybe we can talk. I'll give you a ring Saturday or Sunday when I get in. Okay. Thank you, Bob.
President Johnson and Attorney General Robert Kennedy on April 23rd. The two men talked again on May 13th about the bill's progress in the Senate.
Hello.
Oh, Mr. President?
Yes, General.
Oh, we had a meeting all day today, and with Senator Dirksen on the Civil Rights Bill.
Good.
And appear that we have an agreement with him, and with
wonderful.
Senator Aiken and with Senator
Congratulations.
Solz.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Now, what does he think? Do you think he can get the votes for cloture?
Well, he's hopeful. He's going to have to go back, and they're going to have a meeting of the Republicans on Tuesday morning.
Are you in pretty good shape with the folks that are interested in the bill?
Well, we're supposed to meet with them at 4:30.
You think that you...
Yeah, they're not going to be happy, but that nothing makes them happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just have to accept that.
Well, I don't know. You did a good job making everybody happy on the House side.
Well, remember we went through in that October. They weren't happy when we did it.
Yeah, I know it, but
they
saw the wisdom of it after you did it.
After it was over. But Senator Humphrey did a fine job, I must say.
Well.
Senator Dirksen was terrific. You might just...
Should I call him?
Yes, I think
All
it'd be
right.
nice. And Senator... Should I give you the name? Senator
Yeah.
Saltonstall and Senator Aiken.
All
And
right.
Phil Hard was damn helpful. And Senator Magnuson, very helpful. And of course you get Dirksen. And Senator Humphrey, of course. Who's terrific.
Dirksen, Saltonstall, Aiken, Humphrey, and Hart.
Yeah, Magnuson. Okay.
Thank you, Bobby.
Right.
Bye.
President Johnson and Attorney General Robert Kennedy on May 13th, 1964. Later that day, the president talked to Senate Republican leader Everett Dirksen. They also mentioned Georgia Democrat Richard Russell.
Attorney General said you were very helpful and did an excellent job, and that I ought to tell you that I admire you, and I told him I'd done that for some time, but I'd repeat it, and I hope you go on and let others get the folks together and let's do the job.
Yeah, well, we set the conferences for next Tuesday morning.
All right.
And as soon as those are out of the way, we'll then see what we do about procedure to get this thing on the road and buttoned up. I talked to Dick this morning. He gave me no comfort. I said, now, I thought we were going to vote as a Wednesday, meaning yesterday. But I said, what are you going to do? Well, he said, you're not going to vote this week because we're going to keep the show going. I said, well, what about next week? I can give you no commitment because we'll have a caucus of our members Monday morning. Well, I said, Dick, we're either going to have to fish or cut bait because I think we've now gone far enough and I think we've been fair.
Well,
that's about where it stands.
That's exactly right. That's what you got to do. You got to take care of your own people, and you're doing that. And I saw the other day We don't want this to be a Democratic bill. We want it to be an American bill. And if these schools are out, if they're coming out at the end of this month, and if they're out and we haven't got a bill, we're in a hell of shape. We're going to be in trouble anyway.
Well, we're going to try.
I saw your exhibit to World Fair, and it said the land of Lincoln. So you're worthy of the land of Lincoln, and a man from Illinois is going to pass the bill, and I'll see that you get proper attention and credit.
Thanks,
Bye.
Yeah.
President Johnson talking to Senate Republican leader Everett Dirksen on May 13, 1964. A little more than 5 weeks later, on June 19, 1964, 99 years after the end of the Civil War and coinciding with the celebration of Juneteenth, the Civil Rights Bill passed the Senate by a vote of 73 to 27. The president made plans to kick off the holiday weekend with a White House signing ceremony on July 2nd. That day, the president and Attorney General Kennedy talked about the soon-to-be law's possible consequences. You'll hear mentions of former Florida Governor Leroy Collins and of the Republican National Convention, which is scheduled to start on July 13th in San Francisco.
If it's signed today, we are going to have a rather difficult weekend, a holiday weekend anyway, and encouraging, whether that's Friday and Saturday with the 4th of July and firecrackers going off anyway, with Negroes running all over the South, figuring that they get the day off, that they're going to go into every hotel and motel and every restaurant. Whether, if it's possible, and again, I don't know how far it's gone, whether it be possible to postpone it to Monday and sign it so that it's in the middle of the week. The other problem, of course, is that I've met with Governor Collins this morning. He really hasn't got any appropriation. He hasn't got his machinery set up, and so he won't be able to move in any of these situations. There is an advantage if everything was equal. There would have been a great advantage in signing it at the beginning of the week. But as I say, I don't know whether it's gone so far that you feel that it's necessary to sign it today.
No, I don't think so. Here with the considerations entered into it, they all announced, and we've got to stop that. You tell your publicity man over there, don't say a damn word about what I'm going to do. They've been all these stories come out about who I'm talking to in the South and what I'm doing and kind of the thing we discussed, but we didn't carry out. And there's been 2 or 3 columns written about it. Well, the House did the same thing on me. Some of their people up there planned on what the president was going to do. So they all got it pretty well scattered over the country that he was going to wait till July the 4th to sign it, so that he'd tie it in with the Declaration of Independence. And that was pretty well accepted and generated all over the country before we could stop it. We never mentioned it, never opened our mouth, never said a word. So then some of them started coming back and saying, well, that's not fair. It's the Hallecks and the rest of them who participated in this thing are leaving. And they go into their convention, and you just want to have it so you'll have Humphrey and 1 or 2 of them up there taking all the glory and the people that helped do it. Why do you wait? Why don't you go on and do it when they pass it? So I asked them when they thought they'd get through with it, and they said they thought they'd get through by 3 or 4 o'clock. Now they tell me there's some debate that may go on later tonight. I told them that my plan would be to try to sign it as soon as the bill got to me, that I'd already told them how I felt about it. They knew that. There's no point of waiting until it's the 4th of July. That I thought that would just irritate a lot of people and unnecessarily. And then I didn't think we ought to wait 2 or 3 days. So that's kind of how we got off the hook on the 4th of July, by signing it when it gets to us. Now, when it gets to us, I don't know, but I think it'll be late today. We tentatively told them that we planned to do it today before we heard about this, before I knew you thought it'd be better to go over till next week. Now, we could back up on it, but I doubt the wisdom of it after we said that, if the bill gets to us.
I see, and I suppose all the Republicans will be going next week?
Yes, they quit tonight.
Well, then I think we better go ahead.
I don't know whether they'll even come or not. I haven't invited them because we don't know what time. I told them, get Lee White and Larry O'Brien, put them in charge of the signings, and get in touch with your people and see everybody that ought to be invited. We try to have it in the East Room around 7 o'clock if the bill's here. If it's not, we'll have it whenever we get the bill. But we're kind of waiting until 2 or 3 o'clock to see what time whether the bill has got an hour on the rule and they come in at 12. And if they make them read the record 2 or 3 times, well, it may be late. But if we have it, I'd rather have it tonight than to have it Saturday. And if we have it past Saturday, I think they would think that I held it up 2 or 3 days till they got out of town, because they've questioned. I asked them to stay next week, and act on some of these important bills, and they said that wasn't fair play, that I was being unfair to them, and they wouldn't pass civil rights unless I let them go. Well, I never did agree to let them go, but they kind of had an agreement among themselves to pass civil rights and then go. Now, if I held it over, I think they'd say that I was trying to take a little glory away from them on a bipartisan basis, don't you?
I see. What do you mean, because they won't be here?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that is impossible. I do think that that's impossible.
I think it's important we extend them the invitation at a time when they can come.
Yes, I do.
Even if they can't come. I don't know. Halleck may go fishing.
Yeah.
But one of them told me, I've forgotten who it was. I believe Mansfield called up and said that he's going to be in session tonight. He didn't know whether he could come or not. But I believe that we ought to go ahead if, in light of the fact they'll be gone next week.
That's fine. I'd like to have a chance to talk to you about the, about Poland, some thoughts I had on that.
Fine, you can do it around cabinet, right after cabinet, right forward today, or you can do it tomorrow, whenever you want.
Fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
President Johnson and Attorney General Robert Kennedy speaking on July 2nd, 1964, ahead of the signing ceremony of the Civil Rights Act. Later that day, the president talked briefly about the ceremony with his press secretary, George Reedy.
You heard any more about the signing?
No, sir. I talked to Larry about it, and Larry still seems fairly sanguine about 3. He says it might even go earlier.
You think it ought to be signed today or put over the weekend?
I didn't ask him, sir.
Bobby Kennedy called up and said he thought it might cause a lot of violence in the South, but I don't think we ought to wait.
No, sir. I think it'd be very bad if you waited. It'd look like you're dawdling around just to get a big ceremony or something like that.
And I think it looked like we're waiting till we get out of town, too.
Right. I agree. I think I think you should handle this as an important bill, one that you aren't playing games with. You're having an appropriate ceremony, but you're having it right away because the world has been waiting, this country's been waiting 100 years for it. And there's no sense in playing around with it now and making what will look like a big public relations play. Actually, it will be, of course, but it won't look like it this way.
Any other news?
No, sir, it's pretty quiet otherwise.
President Johnson talking to White House Press Secretary George Reedy on July 2nd, 1964. Later that day, the president talked with his chief congressional aide, Larry O'Brien. You'll hear them mention NAACP Executive Director Roy Wilkins, House Judiciary Committee Chair Emanuel Seller, and Attorney General Bobby Kennedy.
Larry.
Yes, Mr. President.
What is our situation on the signing and how are we going to avoid overlooking somebody?
Well, first on the signing, they're debating the resolution right now. They should be able to. They should vote about 1:30. Claude tells me 1:35. So that gets. We're all set on our end. We've gone over these lists very, very carefully. Lists submitted by justice. Lists that involve the Negro community. Of course, obviously the appropriate congressional people. We felt that the format of the tax bill went reasonably well for a large signing ceremony, and that we would have the key people that should be gathered around you in the East Room. We would have them properly placed, so the appropriate people will have the proper recognition, and we won't have mobs seen of elbowing.
And you look after the Republicans so we don't get cussed out about that.
That's the major part of the problem, is the Keating-Javits part. Now, Kuechel is another story. We thought we'd...
Kuechel and McCullough.
That we thought that we would place them, but nevertheless, the Democrats would have the key spots. Now, in addition to that, when you actually sign the bill and they're seated for your remarks, we're going to have name cards on the first 2 rows. There'll be about 14 or 15 of them, key people who will be placed in the seats that we designate. The others gather again in seats behind them. We may have, I think we've got it geared, Mr. President, that number one, that people that should be at this ceremony, that I don't think, very honestly, we've overlooked anyone that would be key and would feel that someone was invited, and if he were invited, why wasn't the other guy? I think we're in good shape that way. And secondly, I think the format that's been established, Claude and Jack have worked on it, and Claude and I have talked it over in detail.
Just as long as you're in charge of it, I'll feel relieved. I don't want to know anything about it. I just want you to run the show, and I know you'll do it right.
I'm taking the responsibility.
Now, Larry, be sure you check with Bobby to see that whoever they want is invited.
Yeah, we already checked Justice and had them submit a written list to us.
He called in and said that he wanted to put it off next week, and I said, well, I'll be glad to consider it, but we've considered it, and I think it'd be pretty bad to wait and sign until Republicans got out of town. They just say that we're a chief bunch of public relations experts, and I talked to Roy Wilkins and some of the Negroes, and they agreed we ought to sign it as soon as we could.
Well, you mean Bobby didn't want it signed?
Yeah, he said, let's wait till Monday. He said there might be some trouble Saturday in these southern towns. But I think that Kiko and McCullough would think you'd really broken faith with the Republicans to wait till they got out of town to have a ceremony.
I agree with you. I think this is so far down the road that, God, we ought to go forward with this evening.
You said most of the men be out of town next week if we waited, you know.
That's right.
Well, you better bear that in mind when you talk to them. Just tell them that's why we had to go ahead, because you can't let these Republicans think that we're being unfair.
No, we've got to go ahead today, my God. And even some of our Democratic friends, Manny Sellers called me twice this morning. Guys, you know, these fellows, they want to be part of this. They just anticipate that we've given them no specific time at the moment. We will be giving it to them shortly. And they just anticipate they're going to be in town here for a ceremony later this evening at some hour in the relative early evening. And God, I think if we just started talking about next week or something like that, you'd be accused of all kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
President Johnson and his chief congressional aide Larry O'Brien on July 2nd, 1964, the day the president signed the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Following the White House signing ceremony, the president traveled to his ranch near Stonewall, Texas, to spend the holiday weekend. On July 3rd, he got a call from Robert Kennedy. It was the first of several conversations the two men had that weekend. They talked about the reaction to the bill's signing, with mentions of Democratic governors Paul Johnson of Mississippi, George Wallace of Alabama, and Georgia Democratic Senator Richard Russell.
The wires are good. We got about 20% of them were from the South and were friendly. We got some unfriendly ones. It runs about 70-50. I don't tell that figure to anybody, but I don't give it out, but just for you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And we like the ones from the South. I'm going to call... I thought I might call the governor of Mississippi just to carry through today what we'd already started, not let him think we'd forgotten him, and then call.
Now, he's sending his representative up here, and he's going to be here at 3 o'clock this afternoon. That's the first point. The second point is he did call for non-compliance in the state.
What did he say, resisted?
That it should be tested, and that we shouldn't we didn't have to comply until it was tested in the court.
That's bad.
Yeah. The only thing is, if we just stress that, I suppose, even view of that we want law and order, and that when it is tested in the court and it is declared, we'll all abide by the decision if he'd make sure that he'd give some support to it then. And in the meantime, that we don't have disorder or violence of any kind in the state. You do that at least. I think it's too far to go back on the other, but at least ask him to do that for the future.
Any others call for non-compliance?
No, I think that's the only one. I don't think the governor of Alabama said anything, but I'm sure he'll say something similar to that. But it's been relatively common for the first time in Jackson, Mississippi. They've got some of the Negroes and whites sitting down and talking over some of the problems. Some of the people have been down there now. So, there's some promising things. I don't think we could expect anything much different from the governor. I mean, sure, they went to him and asked him, and if he said, got to comply with the law, I'm sure it would have been very difficult for him. But if he now keeps stressing law and order, number one, and number two, the fact that when a court decision does come down, that they have to abide by the law and prepare people for that, that would be helpful.
President Johnson and Attorney General Robert Kennedy on July 3, 1964. The two men talked again on July 4th about resistance to the new law from some Southern governors. You'll hear them mention George Wallace of Alabama and Donald Russell of South Carolina. Also mentioned are Commerce Secretary Luther Hodges and former Florida Governor Leroy Collins, who had become the administration's new point man on the civil rights law.
Hello? Hi, General.
How are you?
Fine. Did you have a good day?
How's Texas?
Pretty hot.
Listen, we had a good day.
Good.
And I think the most significant thing is that the Chamber of Commerce of Jackson, Mississippi voted last night to abide by the law.
Good.
And I think there was one dissent out of 16 to 1.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and Savannah, Atlanta, and all of these other cities went along. Birmingham, Montgomery, a lot of the cities went along very, very well.
All the newspapers spent all day interviewing Johnson City motels.
Oh, really?
They got the right answers, too.
Oh, that's good. But it's been very good.
Well, that's
very,
good.
Very good. I mean, all the work I think that's been done the last 2 months really paid off.
Well, that's good.
And so I think it's most encouraging.
Well, that's fine. When are you going home? Sunday?
Yeah, Sunday. The one problem, and I think I understand you've done something on it, is the governor of South Carolina, about seeing Governor Collins and Hodges. Wallace said he wouldn't see them.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, they sent telegrams to all these people. First place, I think the problem is if we could coordinate what we're doing out of there, I think it's helpful because it puts some of these governors in a tough spot before, I think maybe some of them we could feel out first.
No.
Like Russell's a good man in South Carolina.
And what did he do?
Well, Wallace said that he wouldn't see them. And then Russell said, and he put the telegram out that he wouldn't see them.
Wallace said he wouldn't see
Collins and Hodges.
All right. Now, what about Russell?
Russell sent them a telegram saying that he wouldn't see them, but he didn't put it out. Now, if we could just, if there was some way that we could get that so that we don't have put Russell in the Sanders in Georgia said he would see them, but if we could get Russell just to say that he, out of courtesy he'd see them, he doesn't have to agree to see them. But I think we could isolate Wallace, and it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I had understood that they had brought that to your attention.
No, I haven't heard from them. They haven't told me. I haven't heard a word on it.
Oh, well, that's too bad. They told me that they would already were aware of it and were working on it.
No.
I think if we just, if Russell's a good man, and just as long as he understands it would be harmful if the telegram got out, and they don't have to come down and see him now, maybe they can see him later on, but just so that it wasn't publicized that he was in the same category as Wallace, that would be very helpful.
Did they contact all 11 governors?
Yes, they did.
And 2 of them said they wouldn't?
Well, you see, I don't know. All I know is that Russell and Wallace did, and I know Sanders said that he would, but I haven't heard on the others.
Yeah.
But I think for the future that it would be well if they work with somebody in the White House who knew all those southern governors so that they could feel them out before they sent the telegram. So that we make sure that nobody gets, for some of them politically it's difficult.
Yeah, I know that.
And we want to make sure that...
I'll talk to Hodges about it tomorrow.
Yeah. But otherwise, this thing has been very good.
Fine. Well, I'm sure glad to hear it, and hope you have a good 4th, and I'll see you Monday.
From July 4th, 1964, President Johnson and Attorney General Robert Kennedy. 2 days later, on July 6th, the two men talked about options for enforcing the new law and the June 21st disappearance of 3 young civil rights workers in Mississippi.
Oh, Mr. President?
Yeah.
How are you?
Fine.
Just reporting that it all went easily today, and there weren't really any problems.
Good.
I had a meeting with the people from the alcoholic tax unit and the other people we discussed, and they can handle an increased activity down there without any real problem, and they've had saturation investigations in other states, so it would be a natural course to follow. And they understand, I think, the delicacy of it. They're good people, and our people that have been down there think that they could be very helpful. So we're going ahead with that.
You mean Internal Revenue?
And the alcoholic tax unit.
I don't want to use those Internal Revenue. I'm afraid of that, Bobby.
Well, the alcoholic tax unit, really, people are the major ones. I think that the Internal Revenue just means, I don't think it means more than a handful.
Yeah, I don't want to use any of them in there. I just, I think that has possibilities of really boomeranging on us. And I'd rather use more FBI people, as I said the other day.
You don't have any objection to the ATU, I expect, then?
Well, I don't really know what they do. What is their function now, and what would it be if we sent them?
Moonshiners, basically.
Yeah.
And the operation down there is illegal, and a number of the law enforcement people who are permitted to operate are also involved in Klan activities. And they are a very good source of intelligence. They're the best source. Most of them are Mississippians, so that they're sympathetic down there, but under the right direction, they could be a big help as getting information if there's going to be a problem. I'm just thinking of really the alternative courses that might be open to us, and whatever we can do to prevent having to send either marshals or troops into that state would be damn helpful, in my judgment. And I think the situation's going to get worse, and the choice really between this is an intermediate step between doing really nothing versus taking that other major step. And that's why I think it's got an advantage to it. It just puts a federal presence down there, is activity that if somebody's being discussed about why alcohol is being sold illegally in a district, he's not so apt to perhaps going to a meeting of the Klan. And in addition, the fact that they can pick up intelligence information, which could be a help to us in heading off any problem.
Now, we have a legitimate alcohol tax function. I see nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't want someone that might feel that unkind toward us to take the position that we were using agents to intimidate them.
No, I don't think that. I think that first they understand that it's their own operation. Secondly, for instance, they just completed one in South Carolina, saturation investigation, and so they don't have any problem about having the same kind of investigation in this other state. And what I think really, Mr. President, is that it's so explosive down there that, and with the possibility of having trouble, I just think that thinking of the things that we could do, the best steps that we could do to head off a more major requirement for major federal action in the form of troops, I think that this is really a step that could be very fruitful. That's my theory of thought behind it.
How many alcohol
tax? They have about 30 down there now, and they would in the key districts, they would probably send another 30 or 40 people down.
And they would confine themselves to their legitimate work, but in doing that, they could tell our people what is happening.
That's right. Our people have already met with them, on occasion. And that's a natural event, too. That happens all over the country. So there's nothing that would be untoward, and we would not be having... I'd be glad to hold back on the Internal Revenue. I'd just say that there wouldn't be anybody that would be in there doing any work that would not have a legitimate purpose. They're not going to be agents running all over just helter-skelter without supervision and without an assignment. And secondly, they understand that there has to be an operation that's completely apart from the Department of Justice and completely apart from...
Who do they operate under alcohol tax?
I've talked to him about it.
Is that under the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, or is that a separate?
They have a separate commissioner.
All right, then I'd let them go on with the alcohol tax unit, but I wouldn't put Internal Revenue in there for a while. We'll talk about it and get back.
From July 6, 1964, President Johnson speaking to Attorney General Robert Kennedy. The two men spoke again a week later about the violence in the South following the bill becoming law. They mentioned Democratic Georgia Governor Carl Sanders and his reaction to the death of Lemuel Penn in Madison County, Georgia. Lemuel Penn was the assistant superintendent of Washington, D.C. public schools. He was also a decorated veteran of World War II and a U.S. Army Reserve lieutenant colonel. He was murdered by 3 KKK members 9 days after the Civil Rights Act passage on his way back to Washington, D.C. from Fort Benning, Georgia. The president and attorney general also talked about a body found in Mississippi and the recent disappearances of 3 young civil rights workers in that state.
You got any suggestions on anything we ought to be doing further in Georgia?
No, I don't immediately.
That's a dastardly thing.
Terrible, wasn't it?
But it just shows that, as I understand it, it was the second or third time this had happened. Others hadn't reported.
Yeah.
That was an excellent statement by Carl. Did you?
Yeah,
did
he sounds good. I tried to call him, and I guess you talked to him.
Yeah, I did. Did you see him on television?
No, I did not.
Oh, it was exceptional.
He's awfully good, isn't he?
Yeah, it couldn't have been better. Couldn't have been better. Now, what about Florida? The Mississippi thing. Did you see where they got part of a body down there?
Yeah, evidently it's not. I just seen the papers, and then I had some contact with it, but evidently it's not any of the 3.
Oh, it's not. Well, I got the impression in the morning paper that it probably was.
Yeah, but I had heard that they've at least eliminated 2, and they think they've eliminated the 3rd. So I think that we should keep those families advised, because I think it's awful tough on them. They keep reading about this stuff in the paper, and that they...
Tell Burke Marshall if there's anything that he thinks I ought to do at any time for you to get a memo to you, you get it over here to me so I'll know. Yeah. Now, one thing that I wanted to check with you before we did it, they tell me that we're getting in this list of, there's about 40 of them turned us down on this advisory committee. I think that before we, I don't know how to really run that out. I'd hate to name somebody bad on that committee. Should we run those through the FBI, or you think I ought to run them through Burke Marshall, or what?
Well, I think if we could run any of the questionable ones through the FBI.
Well, how do you know who's questionable?
Well, I mean, if the president of a company or head of a labor union or a distinguished citizen in one of those communities, I think we can be...
All right.
But, I mean, somebody that nobody knows about, I think maybe we should run through the FBI.
I was disappointed. The only one that we lost in Texas, that's the only one I watched. They had 14, and Price Daniel turned us down. The only one that regretted it.
Oh, that's too bad, wasn't it? Are there any others that were surprising?
Yes, there were. No, I didn't look at the list. They said there's 40 turned us down. I thought that's more than ought to turn the president down on the wire.
Yeah.
About 300. We were.
Of course, it's an awfully controversial and somewhat difficult thing for some of these people.
That's right, locally. But the ones that they picked in our state were mostly the people that you'd already had out in front, like Harry Aiken and that Western man in Austin, and like Sam Bloom up in Dallas, and folks like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I want to do. I want you to call me or have Burke Marshall call me on any bases I ought to touch. I don't want to get caught behind. I don't know anything else.
Could you give us a hand with the Bureau?
Yeah, here it is.
I think that if you tell them to keep us advised, because most of the stuff now we read in the papers about.
Well, that's what I do.
Well, for instance, the body, we just we don't know. We haven't found out. And then I think also we should find out. I sent Hoover a memo today about finding out the conversations with Johnson and what's his assessment of what is going to be done in Mississippi by Johnson, and whether when the school opened up. It just concerns me about the fact that the school opens up in the middle of that convention.
That might be a good thing for me to do is to call him and keep notes on what I say and ask him to prepare me a memo. He hadn't prepared me a memo or told me any of these things, and it informed me and the Department of Justice simultaneously, or something like that.
Yes, I think it's good for all of us to know, but I think that
all I know is the details of it. He's never mentioned what he said to the governor. The governor said to me, but I saw in the paper, but it sounded like to me that he got along with the governor fine. I was a little disturbed with the New York Times report this morning that said that indicated that he got along with them too well. Well, the Halverson or whatever it was indicated that he was kind of a racist himself, and I had hoped that we could use him as our agent.
Yeah, I think if he can keep in touch with that fellow, that's a damn big plus up, I think.
Well, I'll just do that, and if I'll get him that request at the end of the day, and you watch it. If you don't hear from it tomorrow, next day, call me.
From July 13th, 1964, President Johnson and Attorney General Robert Kennedy. The Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library and Foundation, along with the University of Virginia's Miller Center, have more conversations from the Johnson presidency. You can find it at lbjtapes.org. On the next episode of C-SPAN's Presidential Recordings, President Johnson and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Please follow this podcast so you never miss an episode.